get started. All right. Thank you so much for joining today. This is the first of 2025. I'm trying to do some monthly workshops that center around topics that are relevant for instructional coaches or folks who find themselves coaching around instruction, whether that's your official title or not. Coaching tends to happen in many different roles. So today's topic is stop asking, what would I do, and coach more effectively. So we'll do a few introductions and a few getting us, started and used to. Hi, Mary. Used to kind of the lay of the land for today, and then we'll dive into the content. So just a little bit about me. I am Linda. I love coffee and I hate pickles, but I actually have an emotional support pickle that was gifted to me on my shelf, who helps me through things. I am nationally board certified. I'm trained in letters and IMSC. I've got tons of years in education. I worked in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, which is where I'm located. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. And my favorite grade, what to teach, was first grade. I certainly think it's the best grade, but I also taught fourth grade and loved that as well. Cool thing is that my boys, I have two boys, and they are both in fourth grade and first grade this year, which is cool for me because that's the grades that I spent the most time in. I love to read. I love to work out. I'm a bit of a geek. And so my current read, no spoilers today, is Onyx Storm. I'm Rebecca Yarros obsessed, and certainly love a good fantasy. So let me know if we connect on anything. Um, my goal for today is for us to think about how can we shift our approach so that we're centering our teachers' experiences in our coaching work. And so really kind of shifting our language to be teacher centered. And then by doing that, right, that allows us to really honor the people that we're supporting. So here's how this will go. We're going through the welcome and introduction right now. I will center a lot of this in a coaching story. So we're going to meet Allie and Sam to kind of help us frame up what we can be thinking through. And then we'll talk through multiple strategies for some pathways that allow us success when we're trying to frame our coaching work in this way. We'll have a time to reflect. We'll close with some connections. And then, of course, I will end with a thank you because I am grateful that you're here. Some quick norms. It's virtual, so I get it. Like, stay as engaged as you can, but it's totally okay if you have to pop off or be human. So no skin off my back there. I do invite participation, so feel free. There will be times that I encourage you to unmute. These symbols on this page, these icons, are just a helpful way to kind of indicate, hey, I'm inviting you to unmute to share your thoughts with the room. And then also the speech bubbles are for the chat. And then I'm also going to attempt to try some polls today. It's been a minute since I was thinking I was going to be a letters facilitator. I haven't used a poll, so we'll see if I still have those skills. And then I just invite us to be in a learning stance and curious with each other. So feel free to pause me and ask questions as well. Okay, so let's start with a quick chat drop, just so we can know who we're in the room with today. If your names are on the Zoom, so don't feel like you have to do that. But if you want to share where you're joining us from and what your position is, and if you'd like, share something you're excited about or that you wonder about related to this coaching language. I'll give y'all a moment to do that. Yes. Classroom teacher to coach and back to classroom teacher for now, right? For now, we know coaching is in your future. Love it. Yes. Stacey, you are doing so much. You're doing all the things. It's amazing. But certainly cool, right? That in those roles, coaching exists. So thanks for being here today. And Mary, thanks for joining from New York. So cool that you are supporting folks with English as a new language. I love learning that coaches have a specific content focus like that. I support some coaches that work with EC teachers, special ed, right? And it's so cool when you have that kind of knowledge and then can flex your coaching skills alongside that. So thanks for being here. All right. Okay, so we're going to get into the content. Let's start with a little warm up. Do any of these phrases sound familiar? When I was in the classroom, or what I would do is, or yeah, I used to, right? So take a moment and think about and reflect on what's your typical coaching language. Do you find yourself using sentences that begin like this? And if you feel comfortable, feel free to use a reaction button or something or drop in the chat to share. Yes, backing your day for sure. Back when I was in the classroom, right? Like certainly we find ourselves doing that. I think I even catch myself doing this. So here's the thing. These are not wrong. Okay. It's not bad. It's not a problem for us to find ourselves using language like this. And I certainly don't want anyone to feel shame if they are in a coaching conversation later on this week and they hear themselves saying that. But if our goal, right, is to be centering teachers, if we're working on shifting that, right, then whenever we use I or we lean on our own experience to guide the coaching conversation, then we're centering ourselves, right? So if we're looking to shift that, then we have to start working with teachers where they are and shift our mindset and language during our coaching conversations so that what they hear is centered on their experience and not just what we did when we were successful in the classroom or successful in our previous educational experience. And this is really hard because oftentimes, like, we're hired for a reason. And it's normally because we demonstrated success in the classroom, right? And so that it's like, hey, we're ready to share our skills and knowledge with other people. And it's exactly that experience that is leaned on, right? And so I say all of that and acknowledge that when we're making this shift that we have to be ready to say it's not about us and our former experience, it's about the teachers that we support. And so that experience and knowledge can inform what we do, right? And it can be infused in what we do while we're using some of these other strategies that we're going to talk about today. So let's jump into our coaching story. Okay. If you did print out the note catcher, there's some spaces to take notes in this, but no pressure. So this is going to be an example of using coach-centered language first, and then don't worry, we're going to circle back to Sam and give him another shot later. So Sam is one of our characters. He is the instructional coach. When he was in the classroom, he was a raging success. He loves helping other teachers in the building. He was like the teacher that when they did one of those walks, right, or the district came in to visit, like everybody went to his classroom, and other people wanted to be learning from him, right? So he was often a model classroom for other teachers in the building. And so now he's the instructional coach. Our other character is Allie. She is a teacher and she has agreed to work with Sam. She has kind of expressed, like, hey, I want to be working on my instruction. And she's actually excited about having a coach's support, which is like the dream, right? Like, oftentimes we find ourselves working with teachers who don't necessarily want support and to be working with us. So, like, Allie is a dream for an instructional coach because she's like, yeah, I want to see what we can do together, right? Um, so those are our two characters. Let's hear a little bit about their story. So, Sam goes into this coaching conversation with Allie really excited. He had observed her classroom while she was teaching, and he knew exactly what she could work on to improve instruction. And when they got to the feedback portion of the coaching conversation, Sam jumped right in. He was like, when I was in the classroom, I did this strategy and it was really successful. And I think you should give it a try, and suggests that Allie should try it out. Allie in this coaching conversation is left wondering, like, did Sam really understand what he saw? Does he understand my classroom? Does he understand my students? Does he understand that kids have changed in the past few years? Things feel different, right? And that strategy might have worked for him, but I'm not sure it's going to be a fit for me, right? That's what she's thinking about. Like, I'm not sure it's a fit for my style of teaching or a match for my students. And was Sam just trying to tell her what to do? She is feeling unsure how to respond because she's wondering, like, should I just try it? He is the coach. Maybe he knows better, right? He's in a little bit of a position of power, and maybe I should just go along with his suggestion. Okay, that's our story so far. So take a moment and reflect. Have you ever been Allie or been in Allie's situation, right? Where you've experienced a coach who does this and you're feeling similarly, you can empathize with how Allie's feeling. And have you ever approached coaching like Sam? Let's share a little bit. What were your experiences? I invite chat. You can feel free to unmute as well.
This makes me think about being a parent as well, right? And when we're telling our kids, oh, I so know what you're going through because when I was a kid, right? And and you see your children look at you like, oh, are you kidding me right now? Right? I relate that so much to coaching because it's kind of in that same pocket, right? They want to learn from you, but they don't want to hear all the things that you experienced and trying to say that that's the same thing as what they're going through in present time, right?
Right.
There may be some similarities or some correlations there, but nothing is ever going to be the exact same thing,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Um, so it's so funny. I can, with Allie, I can like see my daughter and going, oh my gosh, mom, right?
Yes, yes. Well, and think about it, right? Like a lot of times our kids, they're really just seeking validation, right?
Yeah,
Like they want to know about what their experience is,
right,
right? And you're right. Like sometimes our own stories don't help them feel validated in the moment or the challenge that they're experiencing.
right. And
Yeah.
with, my future teachers that I teach, right, in teacher prep courses, I have to stop and think, all right, I mean, I was a speducator of 24 plus years, right? So, yeah, I have a lot of classroom experience, but this day and time, classrooms are different. It's it's just different, right? So, trying to keep that in perspective is something that's like is truly important.
For sure. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Mary, do you want to add anything? I think Cassandra might be experiencing kids coming in, or a colleague. No pressure. All right. So I know for myself, I've experienced this as well, right? Like I have felt like Allie, where I'm like, oh man, like I feel like they're just not even hearing me. And I'm kind of being expected to try this thing that I'm feeling unsure about, or I'm not sure I even feel supported in trying this strategy because I don't understand it. And I don't know how to ask about it or say or express that I don't really understand it either. Okay. So let's think about this. This approach that Sam is using, it could work, right? There is some semblance of, hey, I'm offering a strategy. She's she's compliant enough that she's willing to give it a go, right? She's kind of asking herself, like, yep, maybe I'll give this a go. He is the coach. He's supposed to know what he's doing, kind of thing. Um, but even this willing participant that we have with Allie is left wanting, right? So she might be discouraged about continuing to work with Sam, even though she knows that he means well. So let's take a look and see if a different approach could prove more effective for maintaining the relationship between Sam and Allie and a continued support process for both of them. So, what did Sam do in his approach that might have gone differently? He did some things like positioned himself as the expert, and he might be the expert in this case, right? But positioning himself in that way shifts the power dynamic. So, so often in coaching conversations, we want to be here, right? Like we want to help our colleagues understand that we are not in a position of power, or we lament the fact that our colleagues see us that way when we're like, we don't have any power here. We're not a supervisor or anything. Like we're just here to help, right? But when we do that, we are creating a situation that elevates, right, our position by saying, hey, we're the expert here. You should do what we're saying. And so that shifts our power dynamic. When he jumped into his own coaching experience, he didn't really consider this teacher's desired approach to teaching, right? Like, who's Allie as a teacher? Who does she want to be in the classroom? What kind of approach does she want to be using for her students? And does the strategy that he's suggesting match that? So he kind of assumed that Allie wanted to run her classroom the same way that he did, which may not be the case. And then by providing his suggestion based on his own experience, he really communicated that there's only one path to effectiveness, right? Sam's path to effectiveness. The only way to solve this is to do it the way Sam did, right? And so when we do that, right, we are kind of communicating like, hey, just be more like Sam and things will go better in your classroom, right? And again, that's centering Sam's experience and who Sam is as a coach, not necessarily the teacher that's being supported here. Okay, so I will give us a moment to think about, are there any other things that we would want to avoid in addition to some of the notes that I've mentioned here? Anything else coming to mind that Sam did that we would want to avoid? We're in our what to avoid column here, not what to try yet. Yeah, that power dynamic for me, oftentimes, right, we find ourselves in a perceived position of power. And that alone, right, that perception impacts the relationship that we're trying to build with the people that we're coaching, right? So if we continue to do things that add to that perception of our position of power, it's going to impact our ability to work as a peer and as a colleague alongside our folks in a collaborative way.
I feel like he just kind of jumped right in too. Like, I know we're not doing what to try, so what to avoid. I'm trying to
Yeah, yeah,
stick in
great.
that pocket, right? Not jumping right in with you should try this, you should do this, or those stories of, when I was in the classroom, that piece, not using that as a starting point.
Right, right. Maybe Allie just wanted to be heard and to
Hmm.
share some of her own reflection, right,
Yeah,
on how things went when he
yeah.
visited. Maybe there's
And
more to
her,
the story too, right? Like if Sam only visited one time,
right.
and hasn't had an opportunity to be in her classroom in an ongoing way, this first go, he like that's all he's got, right?
Yeah. I think it is very effective, like repeating when somebody's working with you, repeating what they've just told you, like, okay, what I hear you saying is, and giving that back, one, to make sure we're accurate with, that information we're receiving there. But two, that acknowledgement for them of, I hear you, right? I heard what you said and I'm paying attention, that act of listening.
Yeah, for sure.
Stacey, I was going to say something similar. It's so hard not to jump in right away. It's almost like that wait time that we want to give students, but giving that wait time for the teacher to, invite them to start the conversation. I guess this is the what to try, but just avoiding being the first one maybe to speak, or avoid maybe not having, I guess, that framework of how your conversation is going to go.
Yeah, great point. Using wait time, right? It's such an important strategy with all the people. Everybody processes things differently or needs a different amount of time to process what they have to think about or what they have to say. So it's certainly an important strategy to have in our back pocket. Great ideas. All right. So if we are looking to center the teacher's experience, right? And maybe avoid Sam's pathway being the only one, then we want to broaden our mindset into thinking that there are multiple pathways to success. It's kind of like presenting a math problem, right? To students and understanding that there might be multiple ways to get there. And so we can help people get to the same end goal of improved classroom experiences, improved instruction, right? But it might not have to be a singular way forward. And so what we want to do is start thinking about what are some strategies that we can employ that allows us to achieve possibly multiple pathways towards success. We're going to ground ourselves in Jim Knight's partnership principles. So he talks a lot about in the definitive guide to instructional coaching, how do we have this collaborative stance for coaching conversations? And so when you use language that's grounded in these principles, right? This is where it starts to help teachers feel understood and supported. So we're striving to have equality, choice, voice, reflection, dialogue, praxis, and reciprocity as much as we can during the course of our coaching conversations as we're developing our coaching relationship, because what we're trying to do is that a teacher then feels equal. They recognize that they've been presented with choice and have some autonomy, right? They have a voice in the conversation. They can reflect alongside the coach, right? Without that power dynamic. They're the ones engaging in dialogue. So there's collaborative conversation happening. And then they can engage in the action and reciprocity. So what we start to see is Allie changes, right? The goal of this is that Allie changes her takeaway from the conversation of like, hey, he really understands me and I can't wait to try this thing that we landed on together, right? So as we talk through some of these strategies, we're going to circle back to these partnership principles to see where are we seeing evidence of these showing up. Okay, so if you have the note catcher, there is a space for you to write these down, but again, no stress. So we're going to check out some of these strategies here. What I've done is with the strategy, I've also thought about when might this strategy show up in a coaching cycle, right? So if you see before, during, or after, it would be the before would be taking place before visiting the teacher's classroom, right? So some kind of pre-conversation or planning conversation that the coach is having with the teacher is when before would occur. During might be during a classroom observation or when you are present during a teacher practicing what it is that you're supporting. And then after would take place during some sort of debrief or feedback conversation taking place after some work has happened in the coaching cycle and the two of you are coming together to kind of take a look at that. So this first one is developing shared goals. It would take place before visiting a teacher's classroom, right? And so this is a way that we can honor a teacher's voice. So rather than imposing our suggestions on a teacher, we can work together with that teacher to determine the next action. So what we would do then is make sure to discuss how are we going to measure success, right? What actions are we going to focus on improving during instruction? How are we going to know that we've been successful in implementing these actions? So by developing this plan for success together, right? You outline the plan for instruction, you outline the specifics about this goal, and you do it together. And then a key piece of this is that you discuss both the teacher actions that will take place towards supporting this goal. Does the teacher require some prerequisite knowledge? And they have to do some reading, right, before they do this. Might they feel more comfortable doing some role play or practice with the coach before doing it live with students, right? And then also identifying what are the coach actions in supporting this shared goal, right? Because it's not only the teacher's job to help it work on this shared goal. By being collaborative or being partners in this work, we want to be clear on what's the coach doing, right? Are they doing anything other than observing and collecting evidence of this goal when they're in the classroom? Might they be a partner in trying it out? Might the teacher want them to model it first, right? Whatever that looks like, you want to come up with a plan of action together, knowing that together you've worked on this shared goal and established this shared goal. There might be an agreed upon signal that the coach is going to do when the teacher is live in the classroom to help them meet this goal or to make sure that they're implementing what they identified would be helpful and important. Okay, so let's think about developing shared goals. We're going to test my poll skills here. Partnership principles, launch. Okay, so here's how this is going to work. I'm going to launch the poll. What you want to do is thinking about developing shared goals. What partnership principles are evident when we are using this strategy? Okay. All right. Do we need more time? We're good. Okay. Let me end the poll. Okay, so I gave you a minute to reflect on that. Okay, now let me see. We're gonna go back and I'm gonna hopefully relaunch this poll. And we should work later. We'll see. Who knows? I might ruin this and that's okay. Okay, so thinking about polls, quizzes. Why is this not? Hang on, because I can't see my polls. Close it. So I can't see anybody or do anything. Okay, here we are. So thinking about the partnership principles, here's where I landed. Okay. And then we looked pretty similar, right? But in working together to develop the goal, we're on equal ground, right? Because we're both contributing to creating this goal. We've honored the teacher's voice by allowing them choice in the goal, right? The shared goal is grounded in reflection and determined through dialogue. It's possible, right, that by developing this goal together, both the coach and the teacher are able to be in a learning stance. It may not always occur, right? So while I may have clicked on praxis and reciprocity, that may just depend on how this strategy is carried out with the people that we're supporting. Because we might think about what is the teacher learning, right, when they're working towards this goal, and what is the coach learning about this teacher and the work of achieving this goal that then can be shared with others, right? And then the other piece with praxis is we want to consider learning happens best in action, right? So if we're developing this goal, we also want to make sure that we're clear on those teacher and coach actions that are going to help us put the work forward. Any questions on this strategy or thoughts? All right. The next strategy is looking for evidence. This would take place during a classroom visit. And so this pairs also with strategy number one of looking for or developing shared goals, right? So let's assume that you've had a conversation before the classroom observation and you have a predetermined goal that you and the teacher have a shared understanding of. What you then would do is, as a coach, you would collect evidence of that shared goal. Some ways you might do that might be having a lesson plan that has a space for you to kind of take notes as the lesson unfolds live in the classroom. There might be a checklist related to the shared goal that you determined based on those measures of success. So remember, we talked about like you might have decided, hey, we're going to implement this thing. Here's how we're going to know that you did it. And then you're looking to see, can I check off that those measures of success are happening for this teacher? And this is something that you and the teacher would develop together, right? So there's no guesses of the coach is coming into the classroom and the teacher's wondering, what are they writing down? What are they looking for? The teacher is informed of this ahead of time. So even though the action is taking place during a classroom visit, the coach and the teacher have some sort of conversation and there's an agreed upon evidence that we are looking for. It might even be doing a timestamp sweep, right? Every few minutes, the coach is doing a sweep of the classroom and recording the behaviors that are happening on a student roster. The coach might be helping the teacher collect some student data with checks for understanding, right? So anything that's happening here, you're really just looking for evidence. In this case, opinions don't matter, right? So as a coach, what you don't want to do is look around and be like, man, I really love seeing all of this in the classroom. Like that doesn't matter. You're looking for a focused, shared goal, looking for evidence of the thing that you and the teacher have agreed that they are practicing in this case. Um, so it doesn't really matter whether you liked or loved what they did. You just want to know, did it happen or did it not? Right? Can I see evidence of the thing or not? And that's going to help any further coaching conversations that you have with this teacher. And so again, this is helping to center the teacher's experience, right? Because this is all about what's happening in the classroom. What is the teacher doing? What are the actions? What's the evidence that I can collect of the agreed upon actions that we're focusing on? All right, so let's look for evidence of partnership principles. We're going to test this poll, and let me tell you, if it doesn't work, it is okay. Let me see here. Duplicate partnership principles. We're just going to duplicate it, and now I'll relaunch it. Here we go. So thinking about looking for evidence, what partnership principles are present. All right. Do we need more time? I think we're good. Okay. All right. Hold on, let me end the poll. I might share the results with this one because we have some different answers here. Okay, and then let me switch my slide too. Okay, so I checked them all and I'll explain why, but we have some different opinions here. So we're in agreement on equality. We're in agreement on praxis. What are your thoughts about some of the others with choice, reflection, and reciprocity being selected? Do y'all want to share?
I guess in my head, I could argue these like for before, during, and after,
Sure.
right? Because they all have this interconnectedness with it. So when I try to compartmentalize, though, like what happens before, what happens during, like during, it's that action piece, right? That in the moment piece of where we're taking everything in as an instructional coach. We're watching everything, right? So I think that's where my focus goes, which,
Yeah.
the praxis is that's a huge component there. And that equality piece as well, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these that come into, conversation or, reflection, things of that nature, I can argue before if I'm having that pre-conference and definitely after, right? When the action has taken place, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yep. Mary, anything you want to add? No pressure.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I don't know, my Zoom wasn't working on my computer and my phone's being funny, but okay, great. I
We
found
welcome
my
the phone. We welcome the funny phone. You're good.
yeah, so I think I was looking at it like I'm like I want to check all of these because I feel like it's layered, like you're starting all of them should be present, I think, throughout your cycle or as you're meeting with teachers or planning with them. But I was then thinking like, okay, which ones maybe are more observable in this stage or which ones are
Mhm.
taking like the forefront in this stage. And I agree with Stacy, like definitely that praxis part. But then I was thinking, well, I guess it would depend on, what the teacher and I agreed upon. If I'm co-teaching with that teacher, I really feel like that equality piece needs to shine through. So
Mhm.
there's this parity happening in the classroom for all the students to see. Or, when you're negotiating that out, if there's a change that comes up, that's like, I think where voice, choice, and reflection is all happening simultaneously. So I can see how all of them are present in this part for looking for evidence. But I was trying to think about the ones that were most salient to me.
Yeah. Love it. Thanks, y'all. Great reflections. All right. Let me go back here and fix the poll. Okay. So let's go to strategy number 3. This is looking for facts. And so this again would happen during. It's possible, though, that there will be times as an instructional coach that we're visiting a classroom and we have not had the pre-conversation, right? So we haven't necessarily met with the teacher to develop a shared look for or a shared goal that is then going to inform our work. And so if that is the case, we can look for facts, right? And so what we can do is we can take low inference notes, or if you've been through leadership or principal training, right? This is something that I was always taught to do, that we script tape, right? And we try to type everything that's happening. And capture what is the teacher saying and doing? What are the students saying and doing? How many students are on task, right? At this time, it would be similar to the time sweep as well. Like when we're marking down the times of things happening, what is happening at that time? And how can we kind of detail for the teacher without using video? Because that's sometimes safer, right? For the teacher, especially if it's a surprise visit or not necessarily an agreed upon time. taking notes like this, right, allows us to have something to lean on when we are getting ready for a debrief. So similar to collecting evidence, right? This is similar in that way. But it's also a way for us to offer timestamps and have evidence of something without that agreed upon look for. So what we're trying to do is really just, remove our opinions, remove our bias out of it, and really just try to capture what is happening, what's being said, what are we seeing, and what can be observed or heard in the classroom. And so on the slide is an example of a script tape, right? And this is some teacher and student behaviors and dialogue that happens over the course of 2 minutes, right? So the visit started at 3:13. And then over the course of 2 minutes, we saw what the teacher said, what the students responded with, right? As well as some of what was happening during that. The other thing that could happen, right, is the teacher, if there was no like previous conversation about a shared goal or agreed upon look fors, but the teacher knew that the coach was coming, they might find themselves using audio or video to support this as well. Video can be really intimidating, so sometimes it's helpful to just like hit voice memo on the phone and record some of what's happening, so that later a coach might be able to go back and type up or fill in some notes like this. All right, let's talk for a minute about partnership principles. Hold on, let me make my copy of the poll. What partnership principles are evident in the looked for facts strategy? Don't worry, I did not click all of them on this one on my end. That's a clue. All right. Do we need more time? Oh, okay. Here we go. Let me end the poll. I will share the results and I'll share my slide. All right, let's talk about it. I I selected these because again, we're focusing on facts, right? So everything is equal, good, bad, indifferent. It's just here's what it is, right? And then there's reflection grounded in what's observed, right? Tell me a little bit about some of your thoughts and what you selected. What landed with you in these partnership principles?
This one felt a little harder, I think, because of that framing of if we didn't have that pre-meeting.
Right.
So at first I only chose equality, but then I was thinking, it's seeing the teacher and, taking the notes, seeing the teacher in action. I would be taking the stance of, what is the teacher learning from my, I guess, observed perspective. If the teacher changes something in the middle of the lesson, I think that's showing on the spot. That could be a fact. Teacher changes plan and then I think there's so much that we're learning as we're visiting or observing that classroom. So I chose praxis and reciprocity.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mary, on those points. I mean, gosh, I feel like I'm taking a multiple choice test where I can talk
There's no
myself
right
out of,
answers. There's no right answers.
right? You can talk yourself into answers or out of answers.
That's right. That's
It's all
right.
about the justification, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I agree with you, Linda, on the two points you pulled there, but I also agree with Mary on her points as well.
Yeah,
Um, and I do think it's a matter of where are you in that moment? Because this could look different depending on who you're working with.
for
Uh,
sure.
yeah.
For sure. How often have you been in the room, right? What kind of relationship do you have with this teacher? All of that depends on and influences these
Yeah.
partnership principles, right? And the
Yeah.
way we show up.
Rapport is everything, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Great points, y'all. All right. Let's keep going. We've got two more strategies, and then we'll give Sam another chance to try things with Allie. Okay, this other one, right? So thinking about the evidence and facts that we may have collected during a visit, this would take place after that type of visit. And so if even if you've had the predetermined goal or not, right? Whatever evidence we've collected or facts we've collected, we can use those to fuel our conversation with the teacher. So when we're meeting with that teacher, we might invite them to look over the evidence alongside us. Like, hey, here's what I saw, right? Take a look. What are you seeing? And one of my favorite data protocols is the Atlas data protocol from School Reform Initiative. And there's two questions that I think could be really helpful if we consider the information that we collected during that classroom visit as data, right? We might say, what does this data tell us or suggest? And what are the implications based on maybe some of these trends, right? So, or what questions do we find ourselves asking as a result of this evidence? Because again, it's not about what the coach liked that the teacher did during the course of instruction or during the course of that visit. It's about what information do we have that tells us where we are and either what's going really well and or what's something that might determine a new shared goal, right? So if the shared goal happened prior to this in that pre-conversation, it allows you and the teacher to look at that information and say, how did we do? Do we see evidence of the measures of success that we outlined, right? Or if that pre-conversation didn't happen, it still invites the teacher to take a look at like, hey, was this what you expected? Right? Or is anything surprising here? I always find whenever I do the timestamps, we always end up having some sort of conversation around pacing. Like, I am shocked at how long my warm up was, right? And it's like, I didn't seem like that, but why is it taking 10 minutes? It's like, oh, now we have information that helps us understand beyond just a feeling, right? Or, how we think things went. We have some evidence to lean on to support that conversation. So this kind of helps us invite the teacher to do that exploration as well. All right, I'm going to skip the poll just for the sake of time, but take a minute and reflect on what partnership principles would be showing up in this kind of conversation that's fueled by evidence. I admit, I selected them all this time. Do
Me
y'all
too.
agree?
Yeah.
It feels like it, right? We've got by centering the evidence, right? Like we remove any opinions, we even out the power dynamic, right? That might have come if the coach was saying, "Hey, I really liked how you," right? Because the thing is like the coach doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the coach thinks. It matters what the coach saw, right? And then it gives everybody a choice and voice in the reflection of what is it that we're seeing. Let's have some dialogue about what do we do now as a result of this information. And then we're all learning, right, by looking at that evidence and using it as data to kind of inform the next steps for instruction. Yeah? Okay. All right, let's look at our last one. This is about shifting our language. this would take place both before and after, right? So anytime we're in a conversation with those teachers, sticking to the facts helps us with those conversations in terms of creating an opportunity for multiple pathways, right? So when we make those opinion-based statements, it doesn't necessarily point us to improvement. I was already kind of mentioning that, right? Like, what if we loved something, but it's an ineffective practice? Right. So in that way, it kind of doesn't matter whether we as coaches like it or not. Yes, I'm wondering, right? I say that all the time. I'm like, I'm wondering if we should, or I'm wondering what this means. Yes, I totally agree with you. So when we do things like leaning on the evidence and sticking to the facts, right, it allows us to kind of invite that exploratory language together, right? We might say, I'm wondering, or let's explore that. Like, what do we think about this pacing? And it really helps us remain curious in our coaching language, right? And so we might say, what if, or I wonder, or let's explore. And then that allows us to be partners with the teacher in the work. And then two, when we use language like we and let's and together, right, it establishes the power dynamic that we're seeking to have with the teacher, which is that there is no power dynamic and we are simply on even level, right? We're simply serving as that thought partner and that extra pair of eyes on instruction to help us think about what do we want to do as a result, right? I am your elbow to elbow person to be a support. Yes, I come with knowledge. Yes, I come with experience. Yes, I might even have information from your admin team or your supervisory district people, right? And that can all inform the conversation, but it doesn't have to be what the conversation is centered around. Okay, so let's think about shifting our language and what that means for partnership principles here. I admit again, shifting language for me helped me see evidence of all of the partnership principles. Because again, it's really encouraging us to do this together, right? And so if I'm being intentional about my language, I would even say to the person I'm coaching, like, hey, if you hear me start talking about myself, tell me. Like, hey, I'm working on this. I want you to tell me, right? Um, it helps them understand, like, I want us to be in this together, and I might need practice in doing that, right? So I invite you to be a partner for me and a mirror for me to let me know. Any other thoughts on that before we give Sam another go with Allie? All right, here we go. We're going to give Sam another chance to work with Allie. So we're going to pretend that he has a do-over because he has had some new learning. He came to Linda's workshop on Stop Asking What Would I Do? Okay, so here's the story. Sam recently learned how to approach his coaching cycles in a way that stops centering his own experiences and instead uses evidence to help drive his conversations. He now went into this coaching conversation still really excited. He had observed Allie while teaching, but he had used the look-fors that they had previously agreed upon to take notes. When they got to the feedback portion of the conversation, Sam invited Allie to look over the notes and share her insights. He had also prepared his own takeaways to drive the conversation in case Allie had difficulty looking at that information and having a pathway forward. Allie responded with what she noticed. She asked Sam to help her think through what she might try in the next lesson. And together, Sam and Allie worked through some ideas. And at the end of the conversation, they left with a shared understanding of what was going to take place. Allie knew what she was going to try, and Sam knew how he could support her in her learning. So, why did that go differently? In the first time that Sam tried this, I know, right? Aren't you just like cheering for Sam? You're like, come on, Sam, you can do it. So in the first story, right, Sam's language and approach really positioned him as the expert. And then it really centered this one path mindset, thinking about she should try what I did in the classroom when it worked, right? So he was really thinking in that, what would I do if I were in Allie's classroom or in Allie's shoes? And the next time he tried it, he spent time focusing on evidence. So then he could work with Allie on what he saw in the classroom. He honored her voice by inviting her to share her insights. And then he positioned himself as a peer rather than the expert and worked alongside her to determine future actions. So this second time around, he was really grounded in those partnership principles in the approach that he used. So when we can shift ourselves to that kind of stance, right, we find that our coaching conversations tend to have more impact and effectiveness, and we're normally invited back to do it again, which is what we all want, right? So when we think about this, these are some things that we could try, right? We could put some of these strategies in place where we're used this time. He used the shared look fors, he leaned on that evidence, and then he also used we language in what he was sharing with Allie. So yes, we want to lean on evidence as much as possible, right? Like take our opinions out of it and really help us use that as data to drive our instructional decisions and conversations. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to give us one more reflection question before we close. And that is, how might shifting our approach increase our effectiveness in coaching conversations? I invite you to unmute and drop it in the chat, or you can use it as a self-reflection as well. That's totally fine.
I think a lot of these points are super important for us to, and some, it depends on where you are in the, in your coaching experience or whatnot, I'm sure too. But like taking I out of it, that's going to come with practice and intentionality, big time, right?
Yeah.
But also, as we were talking about at the beginning, that moment of just listening, like really listen to who you're working with so you can understand where they think their challenge is, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
can understand where they're coming from. And then, of course, I'm a speducator at heart, right? I'm going to lean into data all day long, right? Letting the data drive your instructional decisions. We can preach that all we want. But in this moment, this is our chance to show that, to model that, and how that works. So,
Absolutely.
lots of great thoughts today. I appreciate you very
Awesome. Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, I agree. The leaning on evidence is really standing out to me, I think, because um, you know, I want to be sure that those feelings aren't the only thing, that are being talked about in terms of like building that. I think finding that balance of like building that relationship and
Mm,
affirming the teacher's practices, and then starting to talk about what they notice, what you're noticing, and finding, I think, that common observation that leads you to that shared goal, I think, is something as a new coach that I'm working through. And
yeah,
so the piece about, looking at the facts and leaning on the evidence is definitely something I'm learning through this year, especially when um, there might be multiple layers of needs in a classroom, and then you're really
absolutely.
thinking about, well, what's that really first step that kind of is like the gatekeeper of getting everything, situated in a classroom so that you can
Hmm.
move forward and get to, other goals in time.
Right.
So that evidence piece is my big takeaway.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, I did want to share that where I see the coaching system assessment is a free resource that I've developed, and where I see this workshop supporting is with this indicator, right? It gives us an opportunity to set up what our differentiated support looks like for our teachers, right? Because we're centering teachers' needs. So I'll be in my follow-up email, I'll be attaching a copy of that. And if this workshop helps pair that thinking with you, it might help shift where you are too, on the Likert scale related to that assessment. And then if we're not already connected, I know most of us are, but if we aren't, I invite you to connect with me. I plan on offering a new workshop topic in February. I'm going to be trying to do that every month. So I'll be sending that Zoom registration along as well. And thank you so much for being here and engaging in this work and contributing to the learning. I very much appreciate it. Thanks, y'all. I'll be sending the recording too once it downloads.